Hey, welcome back. Joining me now is the panel. On set with me here is Molly Ball, senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Democratic strategist Joel Payne, and Marc Short, former White House Director of Legislative Affairs in the first Trump administration, and he is also a Meet the Press contributor. Thank you all so much for joining me here. And by the way, as we mentioned earlier in the program, we should note for those viewers listening at home, there's a protest going on outside this building. The building houses several media outlets as well. But Molly, I do want to start with you, and I want to start where I started with the congressman. Vice President Vance, he has been on the road trying to sell the big, beautiful bill in Ohio. Let's take a listen to some more of what he had to say.
If you go to Washington, you make some promises and you keep those promises. That's how you earn people's trust. That's how you earn people's vote. And that's exactly what President Trump has done. And I hope that people will reward us for it.
You know, in many ways, he's not wrong. The Trump administration has made good on many of its promises, but they don't seem to be polling very well. What do you make of that? And with the administration hitting its goals, what happens for the future if the American people just don't seem to reward them for it, at least so far in polling?
I think so far in polling is the key part of that sentence, right? I think the sales job on this bill is just starting because it did just pass. And you now have both parties engaging in this contest to define it. Republicans are starting out underwater, and the feeling among a lot of Republicans was that they lost ground over the course of the legislative fight because the Democrats were out there doing politics while they were in the room writing the legislation. I think it is still the case, though, that there are individual provisions of the bill that are popular, but most people don't know a lot about the specifics, and what they know, they don't like. Right. So when you talk about the macro, do people feel like Trump's delivered on his promises? You know, it obviously depends on the person, but in most polls, what we're seeing is they think Trump has done too much. A lot of people feel that when you look at things like the tariffs, when you look at things like the deportation strategy, what you hear from a lot of voters is that they've gone too far. When you look at the DOJ effort early in the administration and the chainsaw wielding, right, there was a feeling of shock and awe, and a lot of voters may like the status quo a little bit more than we think.
Who could forget the chainsaw? It feels like a century ago, though. Lots happened since then. Marc, I want to turn to you. Do these poll numbers matter in a midterm election where, you know, the president, he will essentially be a lame duck here? Will these poll numbers end up mattering?
I think they matter, Gabe. I think the reality is that they should be out talking about the achievements here. I think the Democrats who oppose this bill basically embraced a $2,000 increase on every working family and oppose funding for our border and our military. And I think those are powerful messages. At the same time, it's 15 months off. Right. We're used to Donald Trump changing the news cycle every 24 hours. And so the reality is that if voters are voting on the economy come midterms, it's likely it's got more impact on his trade agenda, frankly, than this big, beautiful bill. That
was going to be my next question. Will we be talking about this one big, beautiful bill come next year?
I think we will. I think the Democrats will continue to try to make it a big point. But I also think that the president's going to change news cycles so many times between now and next November. It's hard for us to kind of predict right now.
Well, speaking of changing news cycles, the president has had his news cycle overtaken the last couple of weeks with the Jeffrey Epstein saga. I just asked the congressman, do Democrats plan to make this a winning issue for them, a gotcha issue? He said that he wanted to tie it to corruption among Republicans. But do you think this will be a winning issue for Democrats, Joe?
Well, I think we know that the American people care about transparency. They care about accountability for the wealthy, for the well-heeled, for the elite. And so that Donald Trump and Republicans have used power, right? And that's what he's doing here. He's using power to protect Ghislaine Maxwell. He's using power to protect whatever Jeffrey Epstein did. And it seems like he has something to hide. And that's not a really good message for Donald Trump, particularly if you want the imprimatur of being the agent of change. That is about as status quo as you can be. That's an effective message. The last thing I'll say, Gabe, I often think Democrats think of this as a choice point between, there's pocketbook issues and then there's these sublime issues like Epstein, whatever. It's all the same thing because I think it's all related to priorities. What do you focus your energy on? You have power. You have an opportunity to make change for the American people. And instead, you cover up for the wealthy. You cover up for the well-connected. You transfer $1 trillion of wealth from the working class to the wealthy. That's not a good record to go back to the American people.
Marc, Congressman Massey told me at the press that he thinks that Republicans failing to pass some sort of bill to release the Epstein files will end up hurting them in the midterms. What's your take on that?
I think they should be releasing the files. I think they should be transparent. I think at the same time, they're going to always fight the challenge of there are certain voters who are just Trump voters, and you need to keep the rest of your party, excited and not depressed about wanting to come out. But, spare me the transparency on the Democrats, because after Epstein and Maxwell were both convicted, the Democrats controlled the Department of Justice, the House, and the Senate. If they were really about transparency, they could have released these documents when they were in control. So this White House has totally mismanaged this. But it's not as if the Democrats have actually pursued transparency either.
Molly, there does seem to be a drip with the story. Even the president today on Air Force One talking about how, the workers that Jeffrey Epstein stole from Mar-a-Lago were young women. That's something that he hadn't really detailed that before. Is he prolonging this by, having this drip of information? Why not just come out with everything at once?
Well, that's the big mystery at the center of all this, is why not just release the files, as everyone else has been saying, and that does enable the story to be kept alive, whether it's by the Democrats or by Trump himself. I will say, though, what is driving the angst about this isn't really Democratic base voters. It's Republicans, and it's MAGA voters specifically. And, to Mark's point, those Trump voters have never come out for Republicans in elections when Trump was not on the ballot. And that's why the Republicans lost the midterms in 2018. And it's why they've lost so many other elections that were not presidential elections. And so anything, and that is who is expressing the most concern. It's MAGA world. It's those base voters who, prior to now, have been unflinchingly loyal to Donald Trump. I don't think they're going to wake up and become Democrats. But if they are disenchanted with any aspect of the political system, they're probably not coming out in a midterm.
Molly, meanwhile, while J.D. Vance was out selling policy, the president was on his visit to Scotland. He was talking about his golf course out there, opening a new one. Let's take a listen to the exchange he had about the idea of mixing his presidency with his personal golf course. Let's listen.
There's some critics who say this was a promotional trip for you and your business, that it promoted you and your business personally. What do you say to that?
I haven't heard that, no. I haven't heard that. Did you get to see my drive in the first hole?
You hit it straight and pretty high, yeah.
Pretty long. Pretty long. That's no Joe Biden, let me tell you.
All right. Well, could you imagine saying that about any other president? What would happen if Joe Biden had done the same thing?
Well, we saw a version of that when Joe Biden was president, and there were a lot of attacks on the business dealings of him and his family, which were supposedly a massive scandal. Look, as a political issue, though, most voters already believe that all politicians are corrupt. So while they're bothered by it, they don't make a lot of distinctions. They don't see Democrats as pure on this issue. They don't see anyone really as having the stature to criticize someone like Trump. And if anything, some voters, I think, find it refreshing that he's so open about it, as bizarre as that sounds, because he does do it in full view. He promotes the business that he, back in his first term, declined to divest himself of.
And then, Mark, that's a very good point that she makes. Yes, he is open about it. Voters knew what they were getting. But what would the reaction have been if Joe Biden, spent part of a foreign trip on a golf course that he owned, or if he accepted a gift from the Qataris?
Yeah, no, it's a double standard. I think, as Molly said, is maybe not the exact same analogy, but I think you saw the family of Hunter Biden benefiting from his relationship with the president, how outraged Republican voters were. And so I think Molly's right that the president does it out in the open in ways that some voters overlook, but I think it's still distasteful. I think it's beyond the golf course. It's the meme coins. Right. It's the Middle Eastern investment in the family's businesses. It's pretty broad.
And really quickly, Joel, because we got to go, but Democrats have tried to make this idea stick that the president is profiting off of his presidency. That really hasn't been able to stick. Why do you think that is?
There is one winner in Donald Trump's presidency, and it's Donald Trump. It's not the American people. Right. It's not the majority makers. Donald Trump quadrupled his wealth, probably has gained in public stature. I think that message is actually going to be very impactful for Democrats as we go down the next 15 months.
We shall see. That message hasn't hit voters just yet, or they haven't bought into that just yet. But thank you all so much.